And now, a passage from The Establishment of the Republic of Hawaii, 1893 to 1894, by Donald Rowland. In the middle of January 1893, a series of events culminated in the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy and the establishment of a provisional government. Opinions have varied widely as to the cause of the rebellion. Some writers have held that the movement was due solely to selfish motives on the part of Hawaiian sugar planters. Others have pictured it purely as an effort to reform corrupt and unsatisfactory conditions in government. Between these extremes are those who have felt that the revolution was brought on by a combination of these two motives and possibly others as well. Whatever the causes of the movement may have been, however, its supporters found no difficulty in uniting upon two main objectives. First, an elimination of the monarchical form of government once and for all time. Second, an annexation to the United States of America as soon as it could be arranged. As soon as the Revolutionary Party was in power, a provisional government was organized to administer affairs and to work for annexation. An executive council made up of 4 men took over the administrative departments of the government. The president of this council, who also handled foreign affairs for a time, was Judge Sanford B. Dole. An advisory council of 14 men had general legislative authority. The officials of the former administration, with the exception of the Queen and several heads of departments, were retained in office. By January 20th, 1893, the provisional government had been recognized as the de facto government of Hawaii by the agents of all foreign powers represented at Honolulu. On the last day of the month, Minister Stevens of the United States authorized the raising of the American flag to ensure order and to protect property and lives. One of the first acts of the new administration was to dispatch to Washington a commission headed by Lorrin A. Thurston to negotiate a treaty of annexation. In its first stages, the project moved forward smoothly. The commission entered into a discussion of terms with Secretary of State Foster early in February, and on the 14th of that month signed a treaty of annexation. When sent to the United States Senate, it was reported out favorably by the Committee on Foreign Relations and had every prospect of final approval. At this point, annexation proceedings came to a sudden and unexpected halt. No action had been taken by the Senate by March 4th, the date upon which a new American administration went into office. On March 9th, the incoming president, Grover Cleveland, ordered the treaty withdrawn for further consideration. A week later, he appointed Colonel James A. Blount as a special commissioner to Hawaii to investigate affairs in connection with the revolution, in particular, those in which American representatives had had a part. Since Congress was to adjourn before Blount could possibly complete his study of the situation, Thurston was forced to inform his government that nothing further could be accomplished for some months. The withdrawal of the annexation treaty postponed the realization of a union, but otherwise caused no change in the general situation. In Hawaii, the members of the provisional government maintained control without difficulty, and as time passed, even felt that they were gaining further support. The Royalists, while very hopeful that Cleveland's policy would lead to a restoration of the monarchy, were willing to await action by the American government. Commissioner Blount was therefore well received by both factions upon his arrival in Honolulu on March 29th. Even his action in causing the American flag to be lowered was accepted by annexation supporters as possibly meaning no more than that this indication of a protectorate was in the way of a clear and exhaustive investigation. The Hawaiian representatives in Washington, meanwhile, tried to obtain from the American administration some expression of policy in regard to the islands, but without success. So far as they could determine, Cleveland's actions had been mainly due to suspicion of the preceding Republican administration. At first, Thurston was quite hopeful, since neither the President nor Secretary Gresham seemed opposed in principle to annexation, or at least to the establishment of a protectorate. He noted that there seemed some desire to submit the matter to a plebiscite in the islands. He felt confident, however, that the commission could convince Gresham, as it had Secretary Foster, that this plan could not be successfully carried out. At this time, the Hawaiian representatives seem to have felt that the Blount investigation would be only a formality, which would be followed by annexation. As the spring and summer months of 1893 passed, the annexationists became less hopeful. Even though Secretary Gresham consistently refused to make a definite statement on Hawaiian policy, by June, Thurston felt the best that might be secured from the Cleveland administration was a protectorate, and that it might be well to prepare for that. Gresham was worried over the fact that a majority of the legal voters in Hawaii would be opposed to annexation. The Hawaiian representatives and other friends of the provisional government had done everything possible to secure publicity for their cause and were confident that public opinion in general was in favor of an annexation of Hawaii to the United States. Politically, however, the matter had become something of a partisan issue, so that Democrats in Congress were forced to support the administration. In spite of less favorable circumstances, the leaders of the provisional government did not waver in their policy. Professor D.W. Alexander was sent to the United States to aid Thurston, and the publicity campaign for annexation was continued. It was decided that if annexation could not be secured, a protectorate ensuring domestic tranquility and protection from foreign governments was acceptable as the best alternative. Some rumors were voiced that Hawaii would seek a union with some other nation if she could not obtain one with the United States. The provisional government at no time gave this alternative very serious consideration. Officials were not, however, averse to the appearance of such rumors, since they might act as a further inducement toward annexation. Commissioner Blount completed his investigations during the summer and left Honolulu on August 8, 1893. It was expected that President Cleveland might end uncertainty on his Hawaiian policy by a message to Congress during the special session which had been called on August 7th, but no statement was made. Late in September, Albert S. Willis was appointed minister to Hawaii, but the Blount report and an announcement of the administration's plan for a restoration of the monarchy were not made public until the middle of November. The stand of the American government at once ended all hope of immediate annexation, and at the same time endangered the existence of the provisional government. Thurston at once interviewed Secretary Gresham and protested on the ground that the United States had no right to interfere in the domestic affairs of an independent nation. The Hawaiian representatives in Washington soon became confident that no active interference would take place. In Honolulu, however, supporters of the local government had many anxious moments before it became clear that Willis had no instructions to use force in the proposed restoration of the monarchy. With annexation a dead issue, the leaders of the local administration were forced to adjust their plans for the future accordingly. The situation which now existed had not been unforeseen, and several months earlier they had started to evaluate the advantages offered by an organization of their government upon a permanent and more formal basis. At first, this was considered mainly as a means of advancing negotiations with Cleveland. It would place the local administration in a better position if a protectorate were to be established. Thurston noted in October that there were strong indications that were we in a form of permanent government, our way with him, Cleveland, would be easier. He felt that Cleveland was not opposed to annexation on constitutional grounds, but wished to do it under different conditions than those under which it had been arranged by the Harrison administration. He also stated that one of the strongest arguments advanced against annexation was that the provisional government was not representative and could not transfer sovereignty. Both Hastings and Alexander on several occasions advised a change to a permanent form of government. As soon as it became clear that annexation could not immediately be carried out, the idea became even more acceptable. Hawaii would have to govern itself for an indefinite period. The establishment of a permanently organized and more representative government would not only make the situation more secure in the islands, but would even be of value in gaining annexation when circumstances changed. Although mention of a new constitution for Hawaii was made in private correspondence as early as August 1893, the men in control were content to move slowly where the situation was so delicate. Thurston at first had held that there was no need for the change, but by October, as noted, had agreed with Armstrong, T.Z. Spalding, and others that a permanent government would be best, even though he still hoped for at least a protectorate. When Blount's report appeared, he felt that the time had come for a change, but that action should not be too hasty. Somewhat later, he sent to Honolulu a long memorandum in which he evaluated the advantages which might be gained by the change, particularly in Hawaii, together with some suggestions as to procedure. Other supporters of the provisional government who were then in the United States likewise advanced proposals. In Hawaii, similar ideas were developing, and by December, the matter was receiving official consideration in the meetings of the Executive Council as well as informally. The first public mention of the possibility of a change in the form of government occurred late in January 1894. The American League, a pro-annexation political club, on January 25th, presented to the government councils a resolution which requested an increase in the membership of the advisory council in order to make it more representative. In the course of discussion on the matter, a motion was made that the whole government be reorganized instead. The members of the councils felt that the proper moment for this step had not yet arrived, since in Washington, congressional action upon the annexation episode had not been completed. The resolution was therefore referred to committee for further consideration. The Executive Council was ready to go ahead with reorganization by the middle of February. By this time, it was certain that the American House of Representatives would pass the McCreary Resolution, which condemned the actions of Stevens in 1893 and approved Cleveland's determination to do nothing further in regard to annexation. The report of the Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs, also due within a short time, would likewise recommend non-interference, even though certain to be more friendly toward Hawaii. In the island's administration, supporters favored a permanent government. Study of the matter in past months had provided a fairly well-developed plan of procedure. The committee, which had the matter of enlargement of the Advisory Council under consideration, was therefore instructed to propose instead a measure which would authorize the calling of a convention to draw up a constitution for a Republic of Hawaii. This resolution was adopted by the combined councils on February 15, 1894, and a committee to draft the necessary legislation was appointed. The act prepared by this committee was brought before the councils on March 8th and passed a week later. The measure which authorized the meeting of a constitutional convention provided that its membership should consist of the acting president of Hawaii and the two councils, a total of 19 persons, and 18 elected delegates. This arrangement gave some popular representation but ensured control of the convention by the party which was then in power. The islands were divided into 4 districts for election purposes. An innovation in Hawaiian election practice was introduced by the establishment of a system of cumulative voting, under which each elector was to cast as many votes as there were delegates to be chosen in his district. Protection of the principles advocated by the provisional government was attained by the imposition of an oath of allegiance upon all electors. Special service to the revolutionary cause could be substituted for certain of the suffrage qualifications established. The date of the election was set for May 2nd, 1894. The determination to establish a permanent government was generally approved by those who favored annexation. The method selected was also apparently satisfactory, although some desire for a larger number of elected delegates was expressed, even by members of the councils. Immediately after the convention was authorized, annexationists made plans to gain as large a representation in the body as possible. To this end, the Union Club and the American League combined to form a new political organization, which was named the American Union Party. The new party desired to be associated as closely as possible with the administration, even requesting an arrangement which would make one of its leaders a member of the Executive Council. It also asked government endorsement of its candidates and wanted a part in the distribution of patronage. The Executive Council took the stand that the pledges requested were not desirable, although it fully recognized the value of the aid being given by the American Union Party. The council also did not favor the assessment of government officials for partisan purposes. A short time later, it expressed the view, when sounded on the subject, that while it would not be illegal, it would be impolitic to nominate government officials as elective delegates.